Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. And I kind of feel like I'm at home. We're going to talk about people and their strengths and how they move through things and how different people need different things. And let's have possibilities. I can tell you right off the bat, I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of great questions, but a lot of the answers are really within a family or within a family dynamic or an individual. I can't tell you what's always right for somebody else, but I can help people figure that out, create a space where they can talk it through and perhaps learn of other possibilities. And I'm just getting my slides up here. Um, yeah, and I'll be very honest and transparent. The word psychosis has been used against me. And so I know it has a definition, and there's lots of stuff in that definition that resonates with me, but the way that word has been used, sometimes it's been used to really marginalize people. And so this is my compromise to say, you know, experiences that have been labeled as psychosis. And a little bit more about me is I'm somebody who started hearing voices as a kid. A lot of times it was really helpful, and then it became really hard. Eventually, I ended up in the mental health system where I kind of got stuck. I tried to be a good patient. Let's try a different cocktail. Let's try another combination. And eventually I ended up on Thorazine. And my life didn't seem like it was worth living. That's how I felt. If this was as good as it gets, not so interested. And what I did was I remembered peer support in the form of 12 step had helped me in my life. And I thought, maybe is there something like that? And I put in mental health peer support. And I found out I lived within walking distance of one of the Wildflower Alliance's centers. And it was really amazing because I got to meet people who were living their lives. And I didn't have to say I had a diagnosis to be able to go. We're just all people hanging out. Whether people had experienced trauma, hard times, loss, grief, whatever, people could define their experiences in their own words. And I have the pleasure now of, over the years, going from that person walking in on Thorazine who said nothing. And I said nothing for like months. I used to joke I isolated with people. That was a step for me. Can I tolerate being around people at all? And now I'm a lead trainer, and we do a lot of amazing stuff all over the world. And I do want to say that there were 5 community health organizations that got named in the World Health Organization's book on mental health approaches, and we're one of them. And it talked about peer-centered, human rights-centered approaches, empowering approaches to move through difficult times or distressing experiences. But anyways, I get to this place, the Wildflower Alliance, and I find out there's a hearing voices group. And at the time, there was maybe a total of 5 of them in the entire country. And so I want to clarify that Hearing Voices Network is not just about hearing voices. That's kind of a catch-all phrase, but if you think you can get a personal benefit of going to the group and you want to talk about your dreams, your inner critic, maybe unusual beliefs. I chuckle nowadays about unusual beliefs because I turn on the news and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of unusual beliefs out there. Like, oh my goodness, how do I reconcile those beliefs? Anyways, hearing voices groups encouraged me to become the expert on my experience. And we're like, okay, you have medication in your toolbox. What else can you put in there? And they said, oh, by the way, there's a big difference between nothing and Thorazine. You might think about some stuff in between. And and anyway, so At first, I just wanted them to fix me, but then I realized I had to do some work. And what were those other tools? And when I finally did speak at the group, I said, I probably listed diagnoses and said how screwed up I was. And right off the bat, they said, you're still on the planet. You must have some strategies. You must have some skill. And so I could go there and feel like a human being versus a mental patient, and to have people help me expand that view of possibility for myself. Here are some of the values of HVN, because I just want you to know where I'm coming from in this. That hearing voices is not necessarily a sign of illness. Hearing voices is a normal, though deeply personal variation of human experience. And for instance, it's very common to hear from a lost loved one. People who've never had a diagnosis, this is a common experience, to hear or see or vividly dream of that lost loved one. And it's usually a very positive experience. Sometimes not, but usually. So that's a common human experience that people have. It's just uncommon for people to have a place to talk about it. 1 in 10 people hear voices at some point in life. This is research coming out of the hearing voices approach, but I will tell you there are cultures where it's expected. You are supposed to hear from your ancestors. There's something wrong with you if you don't. So I just want to say that 1 in 10 is a very westernized statistic. In this research that Marius Rom, he's a psychiatrist who, along with Patsy Haga, kind of started looking at voices in a different way. In the research they did, he was surprised. It was not his belief. He thought if you heard voices, you had a mental illness. But they do this research and he finds out that a third of voice hearers never seek psychiatric services. Their lives are not disrupted and they're having meaningful lives. And so that was an eye opener for him. And as he did more research, he came up with this belief that hearing voices makes sense in relationship to our personal life experiences. No matter how weird, outrageous, I don't get it, experience somebody's having, if I can be curious, somehow the emotion in there, the dilemma in there, the story in there relates to stuff in their life. Which kind of makes sense to me that, we're all trying to figure things out. And what do we use to figure that out? What we know. That people who hear voices can cope with their experiences by owning and making meaning of their voices. And it's hard to make meaning and figure out why this is happening if you can't actually talk about the voices, or if you can't actually talk to the voices, or if you can't engage with them or have somebody engage with them with you. And so, I'm kind of the evidence that people can change their relationship to their experience. And so in 2019, HVN USA was getting all these letters from families, and it was kind of overwhelming. And people encouraged me to try to step in there because I have a family. I have 5 kids, and one of them had a very unusual belief. He wanted to be Batman. And he wanted me to buy the bulletproof vest. And, I don't have the money that Batman has, so it was really hard. But his intent was, he had been hurt. And, an adult was inappropriate with him, and he wanted to stop everybody else in the world from getting hurt. And so, this idea of how do you support and navigate an experience with somebody having a big, unusual belief. So we started HVN Friends and Family Groups, a place for people to come to talk about not just their loved one, but how they're handling it. What are their fears? What are their hopes? What are their strategies? And that so many times people end up in quote unquote crisis or at the hospital it's more of a relation issue. It's not just the individual, but it's the individual in relationship to other people. And if the other people around them have more support, more strategies, maybe we can navigate a situation differently. And here are the values of those groups to respect. I think this can be the hardest one initially. Respect their loved one's experience. People would say to me, oh, they're having a delusion, or they're having paranoia. And I would say, they're having a fear. Let's figure out where that fear is coming from. Or when you're afraid, what's helpful to you? It's almost like if there was a label on it, it got dismissed instead of explored. Uh, examine how parents feel. And we'll talk more as we go along. And for the parents to take ownership of their fears. In these groups, people get to share what's been helpful. But it's not about telling anybody what to do, and knowing that each family has its own limitations or its own values, and to really just share more about, well, this is what worked for us, and somebody else can say, well, this worked for us, and somebody else said, how have you dealt with this? And so it's more like brainstorming possibilities versus providing directives. This last one about creating a safer place for family members to talk about their experiences without judgment, ridicule, or unsolicited advice is really important. When my son was struggling, everybody had an opinion. People who hadn't even met him had an opinion on what I should do. And I had to wrestle with, my own thoughts of like, oh, is this all my fault? And why can't I fix it? And so there's a lot going on there that's worth talking about. I want to share some common challenges that I've seen with families. That the focus becomes all about, I'll say with my family of origin, the focus is all about Cindy and how do we get Cindy to do what Cindy needs to do. And it wasn't about, the fears that other people had around me or how do we negotiate relationships. Whatever I was going through was in a context. And the more I got treated like, oh, this meeting is about what's wrong with me, the less I was invested in participating. If parents feel judged, I know for me being a parent, if your kid doesn't come out perfect, I think it's normal to say, what did I do wrong? Or feeling responsible for everything that this little or big human being who I can't control does. I haven't found shame and guilt helpful. I see a lot of it around, and I find it really get in the way. So the loved one feels shamed and guilt and judged, and frequently judged. And so does the person going through the experience. When I was going through it, I definitely felt like, oh, I'm in trouble or I'm bad or, when somebody would say, no, that's not really happening, I would feel like, oh, are you calling me a liar? Or it was really weird. This whole feeling responsible to versus for. It took me a while to realize I don't have the power to control anybody. My best hope is to control what comes out of my mouth and how I react. But as parents, sometimes we feel like we have a responsibility to do that. My responsibility is to show up in a good way. My responsibility is to put my best foot forward. That makes sense to people. And I know sometimes people in clinical roles have the same issue. People are like, you're responsible to make sure so-and-so does an X, Y, or Z. But frequently we don't have that power. I have my responsibility to do the best job I can do. I'm hoping people can see the difference there. Power struggles in families. between family members and between providers. I know when my son was interfacing with the mental health system, I felt like I lost power. I had to trust my loved one to total strangers who frequently didn't even want to talk to me. You know, they had their plan, their vision. They're seeing my kid on one of the worst days of his life, and they think they have an accurate picture of him. It was really tough. And, you know, struggles between family members and providers. I can remember arguing with a prescriber. I said, "You can't prescribe my son Adderall. He's drinking." "Oh, no, we need to prescribe that for him to help him in school." And I'm like, "No, it could kill him." We had this huge argument, and eventually things happened, and the prescriber actually apologized to me. But it was a really tough experience. Like they learned something in the moment, and I learned, wow, help doesn't always feel helpful. Uh, Fear-based responses. Another issue is that the whole family is suffering from grief and loss. You know, my hopes or dreams are temporarily not happening for my kid. My kid is saying, "Why doesn't my life look like my peers?" You know, is there a place to talk about that? Is there a place to have those feelings? Is anybody talking about those feelings? This one concern. The concern one I see a lot. Parents might say, somebody walks in, "How are you doing? How did it go? Was it okay?" And the person walking in is like, "Oh, they're so aggressive. Oh, they're harassing me." And the parent's like, "Love and concern." And the family member's like, "Aggression, haranguing me. They're just trying to figure out whether I need to be in the hospital again." Like, how do we do that? And I negotiated that with a particular family. And the dad said, "I just miss you. You don't talk to me. I just want to know you're okay." And the adult son said, "I just don't want to be talked to like I'm a mental patient. Can we just be people? Can we just hang out?" And so what they negotiated was watching 3 ball games a week together. You know, that was their way of being together and building a trusting relationship. Secrets, and sometimes these secrets are like just blown out of proportion. Or sometimes these secrets are not actually accurate. It's like, oh, you had a piece of the information, not all the information. It's also part of a childhood development that kids and voices sometimes have this magical thinking that they're responsible for all these things that they have no power over. If I was good enough, my parents wouldn't have gotten divorced. If I was good enough, my parents wouldn't argue. You know, so it's interesting to try to unpack those competing needs and narratives. I was just in a family meeting where the two people have two different narratives, but the parent, not only that, the parent is of this perspective is mine is right and yours is wrong. And I'm like, no, your adult child is talking about how this impacted him. Be curious, be listen, and listen. You don't have to defend yourself, and you know that's one of those multiple truths. Sometimes I say it's like a family can be on a bus, but they're sitting in different seats, so the views out the window may look really different. Um, and exhaustion. Exhaustion is a huge one with families. Sometimes somebody ends up at the ER not because they're in huge distress, but because the family's worn out. They're just worn out and they need more supports. Yeah, this exhaustion thing is, if I could set a limit in a relationship, I could save it. Sometimes I see people, family give more than they have, and then they're like, I'm done. And wouldn't it have been great if you could have set a limit earlier? Of saying, this is what I can deal with. I can't deal with beyond that. This is the limit. And so it's interesting. Everybody gets to figure that out. But a little more about HVN. Research that Marius did, 30 years of research. He had a theory that some people hearing voices navigated it better depending on how they understood why they had the experience. That was his theory. And he did this research and he found out that people who feel themselves to be stronger than their voices tended to do better. People who communicated more about and through their voices tended to do better. Those who set limits and listened selectively to their voices tended to do better. Now, it's really hard to set a limit if you're not listening to the voice. And I'll tell you something about voices. That sometimes voices are like 3-year-olds. Have you ever told a 3-year-old, I'll get there, not now. It's Saturday morning, let me sleep. What does that 3-year-old do? It gets louder. It gets more provocative. It demands your attention. And sometimes voices are the same way. And so if you actually, and there's a difference between listening to them and doing what they say or believing them. Anyway, so many frameworks really work really well with one exception. There's one framework that tends to keep people stuck. And I'm going to ask people if they could guess and put that in the chat. And Sherry, if you can check out the chat. What is the one way of understanding a voice hearing experience that might keep somebody stuck? Anybody have thoughts?
I don't see anything yet. People are thinking.
Hi, this is Mary Lisa. I was just gonna say one thing would be just not acknowledging it.
Right. So if I'm ignoring, denying, distracting, which by the way, 15, 20 years ago, that's what the mental health system had to offer me. They would say, just ignore it. And I felt like screaming at them and seeing how good they would be at ignoring it. You're telling me to ignore at a voice yelling at me. And that the framework that has taught the ignore strategy, don't look at it, don't talk about it, don't share it, is the mental health system, old school, right? And the other reason that that framework would keep you stuck is that people were told, I was told, you have a serious mental illness, you'll be on medication your whole life. You'll never be able to work. You should be happy for moments in time when you're not institutionalized. And that's what I was told. And if I was told that, what would I try? Why would I try? I'm being told I'm hopeless, that my best bet was for a better medication to come out. I'm trying to move this along quicker though. So, okay, you guys got to answer this question. What color is the dress? Please put in the chat. What color is the dress? Yay, signs of life. All right, so I think we have a little problem with consensus reality. Because I am seeing a lot of different colors in there. I've never even heard the yellow one before. So yeah, white and gold, purple and black. So what happens? I'm a white and gold person. What are you, Sherry?
I see a bluish purple with brown stripes.
All right. So if I say to you, Sherry, you're wrong. You're delusional. Do you want to talk to me?
No, I'd probably at least, I hope I wouldn't, but I think I'd probably want to argue with you.
Right. And so that is what we're saying when we say acknowledge that the experience is real. I have to believe Sherry when she says, this is what I see. If I don't start off with that premise, we're not going to get far in a conversation. I don't have to say that's what I see, right? I can say I see something different, but please tell me about what you see. Does that make sense to people? So that's the first part. Usually family members are like, no, that's not happening. No, it's not real. No, right? And that kind of stops the communication. Somehow I feel as the voice here that I'm bad, I'm wrong, or they think I'm lying. So acknowledge the experience is real. Not to feel obligated to do what the voices tell you to do, but to be curious. Why is it coming up? What's the metaphor? What's the meaning? Why is it coming up now? When does it come up? I was going to groups and I said, I have a voice telling me to kill myself. I knew not to say that to my psychiatrist, who was a lovely man. I just told him, I think someone's trying to kill me, which wasn't much better. But the group, yeah, he said, well, let's adjust the meds. But the group said, when do you hear it? And I said, all the time, because it felt like all the time. And they said, get file cards. And whenever you hear it, write it down, just briefly, like time of day, where you are, what you're doing. And the first thing I found out was I don't hear it all the time. Oh my gosh. It just felt like all the time. And that began to shift my relationship to that voice. Eventually, what I did was I wrote down what it said. And then we could see where else in my life had I gotten those messages. Did I believe those messages? And they're usually shame and guilt messages. Go ahead, Sherry.
I thought it was such a great response that I think it's Telia or Telia put in the chat. They wanted to know, so what is the actual answer to the name of the color? It sort of proves the point that we're trained to think that there's only one right answer. So I just thought that's
Right. I've had lawyers. I've done this for commitment lawyers, and they're like, "Who's right?" And I said, "Do I need to tell you who's right and who needs to see the doctor? Like, what do you mean, who's right?" And so it really depends on the pigment in your eyes, right? And other stuff that I'm not aware of. So what's really right is whatever you really see. Would be my answer. But yeah, people do get into, well, who's right? Well, I'm telling the truth. Are you? All right, so more context of voices. Voices can serve as a reminder of unresolved issues or on the anniversary of an event. This is something families have that doctors and therapists don't have that knowledge, right? Of like you as a family member can say, oh, I see every November you struggle. Let's think back, was there anything that happened in November? Oh, your best friend from high school died in a car accident. Maybe that voice is related. Maybe not, but let's see. Voices starting in the year of major life events, and major life events are in the context of how sensitive the person is. And so for somebody, it might be a really big deal to have moved during freshman year of high school. For somebody else, it might not have been a big deal. So to be really open about what was a major life for that person, the way they saw it. We talked about the lost loved one. I'll just throw out a curious thing that when somebody hears from somebody who's passed on that voice, it is not a good message. Again, it's usually shame and guilt. And of somebody saying, I feel bad I wasn't there for them, or I feel responsible that maybe I could have stopped it. Sometimes people get a voice like that. When I've done training with veterans, which I love to do, I learned that veterans sometimes see and hear from people they've killed. I was like, wow. Sometimes there's a voice that's a spiritual guide. I had a mom write and say, "My young child is hearing voices. Talk to me." And I called her up and I said, "What's happening?" And she's like, "Well, I have an 8-year-old and she's hearing a voice." And I said, "Have you asked her if she knows the voice?" "Yes, it's her grandmother." And I'm like, "Is her grandmother alive?" "No, she died last summer." And I'm like, "What's the problem?" But this mom didn't know. Like I said, it's a voice giving her a hard time. She said, "No, it's a comfort." But the whole idea of hearing a voice kind of freaked out the mom because she didn't know it was like actually a normal human experience for all kinds of people to hear from a lost loved one. I had a friend of mine who would go to the group who would hear from his dad. And a year in, he's like, "I don't hear from my dad anymore. I miss him. I'm kind of sad." And I said, "Well, why don't you offer it up, maybe like a prayer or attention and just ask him to come back?" He comes back the next week. He goes, "My dad came back, and you know what he told me? He told me I don't need him right now, that I got this. But if things ever get hard again, he'll come back." Um, the biggest one that I see is that causes distress is a voice that repeats negative messages. So if somebody was bullied in school, there may be a voice that's repeating what that bully said. For me, I experienced childhood abuse, and my meanest voices, once I wrote down what they were saying, I could recognize they were saying the things that were said to me when I was being abused. Sometimes the message is more of like a cultural or global one. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not smart enough. You're not successful enough. It could be more of a societal message than an actual message you got from a person. I love this last one. Ages of voices can be linked to events that happened when the person was that age. So, like, I had a 6-year-old voice, like, never aged as I aged. And I had 12-year-old voice that never aged as I aged. And so a really important question is, "Gee, Cindy, what was happening when you were 6?" Maybe that voice is holding on to an experience or a part of you. Like when I do look at the word psychosis, the way the Greeks defined it, they talked about splitting into parts. And in that way I can relate to that word. When life is too hard to hold the way it is or the way I think it is, maybe I break into pieces to try to survive, to have a piece of me survive. And so I think this is I really love this list. This woman, Jamie, she had her own experience, which she could define. But these things, these problematic beliefs, I see these not just in voice here. Sometimes I see it in family members. I should have known better. I did something wrong. I can't trust my own judgment. Look what's going on with my loved one. These are really tough messages. Sometimes these messages are what voices are saying to somebody, or because these voices are saying this to somebody, these are the person's belief. And so if there's experiences, if there's counter messages we can give, like that last one, I can't get what I want. I'm powerless. Providing choice and options in somebody's life, that's like a counter message to this. So I had a lot of these beliefs, but as I had different experiences, it changed my beliefs. That's something family members can do. I'm in danger. Well, Cindy, I'm going to stay with you, and nobody's getting to you unless they come through me. Or Cindy, what would help you feel safer? Can we lock the doors? I had a period in my life where I put pots and pans on my stairs because I felt in danger. And the point was, I could hear somebody coming up the stairs before they could get in the apartment. Now, the people around me are like, what are you doing? I said, I'm not hurting you. They're my stairs, my pots and pans. If it helps me sleep, let me do that. And kind of going back to what Sherry said, my mother and father both struggled, but my mother really hit a tough spot when a psychiatrist gave her Valium and told her not to drink. That just did not work out well. Nobody was talking to us kids. How do you feel? So if you're living with somebody going through something big, guess what? You might be catching a little trauma. I feel powerless in this. I feel impending doom. I feel like this is unreal. It's hard to believe even what I'm seeing, right? Questioning reality. So this slide is for family members and for their loved one. Let's address shame and guilt and get it out the door. I feel like saying, throw shame and guilt out and put love in there. That's the antidote. Know that you do the best you can with what you know, and when you know better, you do better. Being seen, heard, and validated. It's really hard to be seen, heard, and validated if you're talking about voices and visions and people are telling you you're wrong, or don't talk about it, or that's just a symptom. Playing a role in one's own healing or rescue. That helps people move out of it because now you're not powerless. Human connection and sharing information. Sometimes people couldn't give me power, but they could give me information. They could say, okay, you're in the ER, we're going to look for a bed. If we don't find a hospital bed, we can send you over to respite. That was empowering to know what the heck was going on. Sometimes that's just so one of the biggest things I've learned is I need to take care of me, or I'm not around to take care of somebody else. Wrecking me is never the solution, right? And that's really hard for family members sometimes. I used to tell my son, I wish I could donate a kidney and that would help. If there was a thing I could do, I would do it. But sometimes I would do too much and then I'd be a grouch. And it just wasn't right. So I need to know what my limits are, and I need to be able to state them, owning them. So instead of saying, you're driving me crazy, I could say, which I did say, I can say, I need sleep or I turn into a grouch. Can you listen to that music on headphones? And you know what he said to me? Can you put in earplugs? I said, yeah, why don't we both do that? You do the headphones, I'll do the earplugs, and maybe I'll get sleep. Starting with basic needs, food, water, sleep, and shelter. If I don't have enough sleep, or they don't have enough sleep, it's just gotta be hard. Help isn't help if it isn't helpful. And whether that's a particular counselor, treatment program, whatever, or with my son, sometimes I did things out of parental guilt, but they weren't really helpful. And so I had to sit back and say, is this really helping? And have a conversation with my son. We've done this 4 times. We have gone through this thing 4 times. I don't think it's helping. We need to do something different. So now, I really try to think about, is this really helpful? And of course, he says to me, well, let me know when you figure out how you can be helpful. I said, I will let you know. And if you have ideas, feel free to tell me. But I know I can't do this thing anymore. And be transparent about your own needs, concerns, and fears. Yeah. And sometimes that is, I'm so sorry I can't do that. Or I'm so sorry I can't fix this. Or I really wish I could. Or I'm worried about this. Holding multiple truths. This is a little bit about like, I think it kind of covers this, but like even in the same family, each member might tell the story differently. So to say, okay, I had great intent and it landed poorly for them. Both things can be true, right? Can we quit fighting about that and just say, hey, I'm curious, how did you come up with that idea? One of my kids, when they were 12, they were assaulted. And, I took them to the ER, did all that. And then I went to the police station and I went to the school. And I told the police, I want you to pick up the kid who did this and scare him. I don't want you to arrest him, but I want you to scare him. Years later, my daughter said, you did nothing. Because I didn't tell her what I was doing. She got her stitches, she got home, and I went out the door to take care of business, but never even told her. So it's kind of that kind of thing, if I had kept her in the loop, she would have had an idea. Building connections instead of arguing facts. I think that blah, 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 blah is going to happen. And instead of saying, no, that will never happen, you can say, how does that make you feel? Have you heard of something like that happening before? Or again, if somebody, says, I have this voice yelling at me, you may never have had a voice yell at you, but I bet you've been yelled at. And you might say, hey, I hate getting yelled at. That's connecting, building on strengths, curiosity, those open-ended questions. And I want to get us, I want to do this, but we really don't have time. This is like, I wanted the group to have practice making metaphors, but maybe we'll try to do this. So I go on a unit and the person says, the doctor on this unit is an agent. Now I can say, oh, they're crazy, or that's a symptom, or I can try to understand what are they trying to tell me. So if people have guesses on any of these, what that could be a metaphor for. So one is the doctor on this unit is an agent. My parents are vampires, but not the evil kind. I like it's a bee, but all right. The doctor on the unit is an agent. The person said, yeah, he's like a travel agent. He gets to decide when and where I go. And I was like, hey, that kind of makes sense, right? Like I'm trying to seek to understand. Oh yeah, spying on me and reporting. That makes sense too, right? I was thinking of that, like Secret Service agent, FBI agent, right? Yeah, it could mean different things, but the point is to try to figure out what it means, right, to that person. The vampires, mom was like really upset. Oh, my son has this unusual belief. And I said, what do you think it means? Oh, I like this red wine at night. I love that. What it meant was his parents were getting older and they were talking about end of life and what would happen, who would take care of him when they were gone. And so his solution was to say, they're vampires, they'll never die. Oh, I love this. They're going to investigate my blood and report it back to the police. Yeah, and I would say, wow, have you had issues with the police? Oh, I love this is war. What this person said, parents versus staff deciding who gets what they want. In this particular thing, my mom said, I'm really concerned because he ended our phone call with this is war. And so I was throwing out things like, is he watching the TV? Like I'm trying to figure out things that it might mean. And And what he said to me was, what I said, maybe he means it's a war within himself. And the mom said, that's it. But if I hadn't asked those questions, we couldn't have gotten to what she went from being very afraid that he was going to, do something with war versus he was saying he had a war within himself. I was talking to a guy who was hadn't talked for a long time and was starting to trust me, and he had a lot of anger, but he was starting to trust me and sharing his voices. And I asked him, do you want to tell me what this voice is saying? Like, I could see him talk back to the voice, but I wasn't hearing what the voice was saying. And he said to me, it's a bee. And I'm like, I'm pausing. Okay, it's a bee. And then I said to him, okay, when I think of bees, I think about honey and I think about getting stung. And he said, yes, it has 5. It has 5 ways to sting me. See, that was a way of getting information. I have a voice telling me to kill myself. If you ever watch the HVM Beyond Possible film, you will see Caroline talk about the metaphor there. Maybe something in my life needs to die, but not my heart. Maybe there's a relationship that needs to end, that I need to stop living my life this way right now. Something needs to change. All right, so in the moment, this is important. In the moment, it looks scary. I'll give you an example. I come into my house and my very large teenage son is in the kitchen with a machete swinging it. I'm freaking out. And I call somebody up and they say, is he threatening? No. Is he yelling? No. Is he breaking anything? No. And they say, well, why don't you ask him what he's doing? And I said, hey, what are you doing? And he said, be very careful. Be very quiet. You could hear it cut the air. I was very quiet, which was good. It helped me calm down. I'm like, I can hear it cut the air. I could. And I said, now, can you do that outside? Because I'm freaking out. Can you do that in the backyard? Okay, that looked like a dangerous situation, right? Fortunately, I had someone to talk to help me calm down, the family member calm down. Now, what if I hadn't had that person to talk to? I have to think, if this is truly dangerous, what will help increase or decrease the danger? If I had called the police and said, my large son, who you all know, is in the kitchen with a machete, that would have been way more dangerous, right? Another option, if I hadn't been able to figure this out, a less dangerous thing would be for me to leave. So when I'm looking at a situation, I need to figure out, how do I make this, is it really dangerous or not? And how do I, increase or decrease? Somebody will call me up and saying they're pacing. I'll say, great, that's helping them stay in their body. Or he's yelling again. Where is he? He's in my room. He's in his room with the door shut. I'm like, okay. I said, if you want, you could knock on the door and join him in yelling at his voices if that's what he's doing. You can listen, and see what the themes are. I'm a big fan of FU therapy, of like, how do you get that anger out in a way that doesn't impact other people? So driving around in a car when the window's up swearing, the anger, if somebody has anger, it has to get out. How do we do that in a way where it doesn't impact people? Turning FU into F this. It's all your fault. You wrecked my life. You're not helping enough, right? Somebody's yelling at you. Just say, I'm angry too. I'm angry. I haven't been able to fix your life. The safest place in that anger is to partner with somebody. I'm mad this is happening too. I'm frustrated too. To be seen, heard, and validated. Um, the more calm I am, the calm can be contagious. Somebody's loud, I might get softer. Somebody's loud, I might get smaller and stay calm. Um, one more, two more on this. Consider the impact of the relationship. However I respond, I also need to think, how will this impact our relationship? Will they trust me? Can I be forthright and honest and say what's going on or what my fear is or what I need? It's just disheartening to me when someone calls me up saying, I called crisis on my son, and I'm like, did you talk to him? No. Did you give him a heads up? Did you give him a choice? And that happened last night, and I said, can you go back to him and give him a choice? What do you need for you to feel all right about this? And it worked out. But yeah, that has to be before, unless there's whenever possible, I'm going to try to have a conversation about it. This is the model we use: validation, curiosity, vulnerability, community. I see you as a person. I accept you. I'm here to partner with you. I value your individual story, your whole story. I care about you and your life and the context of this moment. Vulnerability, I'm also a person with my own strengths and limits, and including what am I able to do? Community, we're not alone. Maybe we need families. We need more people on the team. We need more supports, right? How do we get a bigger community? I have a few more slides. The one on this, I'll just say future plans. Plans of their making, not the family's plan. It can be small, something to look forward to, something to build on. Opportunities to name feelings and express them. I know, when I got a diagnosis, if I had a feeling, it was like everybody thought it was a symptom. I couldn't even be mad when my son had a car accident with my car. I'm like, dude, you don't have a job. Who's going to fix my car? Everybody's like, don't get upset. Don't get upset. No, this is normal. It is normal to be mad about this. This is not something else. Calming strategy. So I had a group where somebody told somebody else how to breathe, how to do relaxing breathing, and the other person said, don't tell me how to effing breathe. I know how to breathe. So another strategy is for me to say, hey, I need to take a deep breath. Like modeling that. Or you want to go for a walk, or those kinds of things. You talked about choice and power. Families can mirror back strength. To keep that, that person, whether you can see the person who's in there from before whatever happened, they're still in there, calling out to that person. I believe in you. I've seen you do amazing things. Whatever is sincere. Remember the time when, or there's one person loved to play baseball, but now wasn't able to. And the mom took him to go watch his cousin play ball or his nephew or something. And that was great. It reminded him of what he enjoyed. He might not be on the field, but he's still enjoying watching the game. This is like the real punchline. I'm almost done. this is what family can offer that usually nobody else can, or not in the same way. Connection. I can remember visiting my son in the hospital at a time when he was very mad at me. And he said, "Why are you the one who always comes?" I said, "Because I'm the one who loves you no matter what. I'm sorry that you're unhappy that it's me, but I'm the one who shows up for you." And also in my own life, I used to think, I need to be connected to somebody or I'm going to fall off the planet. So somebody to be connected, someone who cares, someone who, wants to know I'm okay. Timeline. If I'm having these big events or if I'm taking psych drugs or the combination, sometimes I may have a very hard time keeping track of the timeline. When was I here? When did we live there? When did these changes happen? For me, I have things I can't remember, that I can't forget, that I wish I could, that are burned into my mind, but I can't tell you what year they happened. So trying to keep track of that. I think some of these drugs marketed as antipsychotics really impacted my memory. That I just couldn't. I wasn't holding the memories. It just didn't get into long-term memory. So yeah, family can provide that timeline, awareness of the here and now. I know it feels like whatever the person says it feels like, but right now you're with us. Right now, to let them know they're not alone. For me, I would, get thrown into this fear with a voice that was like replicating an awful experience, and somebody would say, "You have power now. You can take care of yourself now." And they would build me up. That happened, and that was awful, but this is different now. I'll give you an example of I'm driving a car with somebody who did 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and it's really hot. My air conditioner is not working in my car. And I see him start looking up and looking on the side of the road. I said, "Are you looking for helicopters?" "Yes, and roadside bombs." And I said, "Look a little harder. See all the green grass? You are not in the desert." But his body, the heat reminded his body of this time of tremendous fear. It wasn't even in his conscious mind. So that's something that families can offer. Positive messages, calm context, modeling emotions, holding that vision of I was talking to a family member who said, "We told our son, no man left behind. We're in this with them. We're gonna get through this." So hold that vision of possibility. This is my last slide about advocacy. Promoting informed consent. Here are these psych drugs. This is how they work. This is the impact of taking them. They can be really helpful. And these other things can happen too. What's the information? I was so mad when I found out that Haldol I'd been taking for over 10 years was thinning my cortical lining. I wish somebody had explained that to me. So it's tough. But informed consent is also, what are other options that you can add to or instead of? Have you tried neurofeedback? Have you tried EMDR? Are there other things we can do? Sometimes people get put on certain drugs because we've tried everything. And I'm like, no, you haven't. You haven't tried everything. Have you tried, yoga? Have you tried whatever? Let's try a lot of things and see what works for that person. Let's get a lot of tools in that box. Pills can help me sleep. can calm me down, can calm my mind, but they really don't help me process feelings or trauma. They really don't help me change my beliefs. They sedate my beliefs, my problematic beliefs. Amplifying the voice of the person receiving services, being a witness. This is not just about the mental health system, but I think in general, people behave better when there's witnesses. And so if you're a witness, if somebody's in a hospital and you call that hospital and say, that's my son in there, my daughter in there, I think your son or daughter is going to get better treatment. Even if the hospital says, oh, they didn't sign a release. And the parent can say, yes, I know they didn't sign a release, but I want you to know they have family. I think that's really important. Sometimes I would go to meetings with people and I would take notes. I can remember a psychiatrist saying to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking notes. What are you doing? Because they were taking notes too, right? What are you going to do with those notes? I said, I'm going to give them to the person so they will have notes on what happened in this meeting. Like, oh my gosh, why not? Making sure the whole person is seen and not just reduced to a diagnosis. It's really important. Gathering information. What have they been on? What has worked? What do good times in their life look like? Documenting services. At some point, somebody may say, hey, I want to put that puzzle of the past 10 years together. It's great if you have the pieces to help them do that. And sometimes this includes advocating for different options or services. And that might mean, I can remember in Massachusetts, I said something about, sometimes the community of choice or the thing that somebody wants to do, it might be the comic book club, or it might be rugby, or it might be, Dungeons and Dragons. It might be, and the people at departmental health said, well, we don't have any mental health groups like that. I'm like, yeah. They don't have to go to a mental health group. Like, they could just go bowling. It doesn't have to be bowling for people with diagnosis. Like, can somebody just pursue something in the world beyond that? So I have done a ton of talking, and I'm wondering if people have questions or comments or.
Yes, and feel free to either unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat or raise your hand. And by the way, I have to say, Cindy, I love the note-taking response. Taking notes. What are you doing? Makes sense.
Cherie, can I just jump in for a minute? This is Janice.
Of course. Hi, Janice.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Cindy. I'm Janice Tondor. I'm actually one of the co-directors of the New England MHTTC, and I have to jump off a little early, but I wanted to make sure that I jumped in here really just to kind of thank you, not just for today's presentation, but for kind of the work that you're doing in this space. Like Cherie was saying, in the introduction about our recovery and resilience principles at the New England MHTTC, we're always trying to promote recovery-oriented strategies and resources, and that's always better when it's informed by lived experience perspectives. And we do our best on that front, but we also know we need to do a lot more. So I told Cherie I was just so excited that we were kicking off 2024 with this conversation in particular. So a big heartfelt thank you. On a personal level, in addition to being the co-director of the New England MHTTC, I'm also a loving mom of a young adult who's pretty open about their distress from mental health challenges. And I learned a lot today, a lot of really good reminders about what's maybe helpful and frankly not so helpful as a family member sometimes. So big thank you. And, hopefully we can do more of this in the future.
Yay. I was, it did my heart good to see that slide about your values. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to come into that kind of environment for a change for me. Like, yeah, cool. Thank you
We're
so
trying,
much.
but we always need to do better. But this is a part of that.
Hey,
So thank you so much.
it's a process, right? I keep learning. So I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. My name is Mercida. I kind of put in a chat during Thanksgiving. I had my cousin that called me in distress. She was going to Emory, which is a really, really good school in Georgia. Right around that time, she called me, "Hey, come get me." I came and got her, and out of the blue, she was kind of like just dazed, and then she sat with me, and then out of nowhere, she kept saying, "I need to go to a church. I need to go to a church." Now, we're really spiritual people, but I just finished my documentation as a mental health coach, so I knew something was going on there. And right out of the blue, just to be quick, she said, "I know what you're thinking." And mind you, this never happened before. I never seen this out of her. She said, "I know you're thinking God is finished with me, but I still want God." And that kind of scared me first. But then I was like, "You're safe. I love you." I prayed with her. Then she calmed down. And then, she finally slept. She stayed with me. The next day, she was like, "I'm going to campus, get my stuff." Long story short, she goes back to campus. She kept wanting to come here. And her mother was like, "Stay there, pack up." She kept wanting to come back here. I think this was a place of safety. That night, they called the police. She was saying vulgar things she had never said before that was sexual. And she started cutting out all her hair. They took her to a mental hospital and they diagnosed her with psychosis. So with that, I was just kind of wondering, like, as a family member that's supporting her and also deal with PTSD and anxiety, how can I help her and
So
not
I,
fall?
so I would just like with anybody having a big experience like that, I would say let's look at what was happening in the preceding year, and when you're saying God is done with me, the thought I had was shame and guilt. That something happened that she's feeling an incredible amount of shame and guilt about. That would be my guess.
Yes, when she was 16, I found out that she was addicted to pornography.
Right. And
And yeah.
and so whatever framework somebody has, so if they have a spiritual framework, I would use tools in that framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I felt like there is a God, but I don't count. Like I believe in God, but God doesn't believe in me. I worked with somebody who could use scripture and prayer, to change that. He would say, Moses killed somebody, and look what God did with him. He just tried to convince me that I was loved, and that God knows everything I've done and already has forgiven me. But I'm just saying that, like, whatever the framework somebody's in, if it's spiritual, I would jump into it. If it's the electromagnetic waves are frying my brain, I would jump into that one. How do we get you to a place where there's no Wi-Fi for you to rest up? I've done that with people. So I hope people aren't taking offense with where that conversation went, but I try to get into whatever framework somebody's giving me. So yeah, I would address shame and guilt. Give her a place to tell her secrets. Let her know she's loved. I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but use those. If that involves a loving higher power, I would go down that road.
Well, thank you. And that's what we've been doing, and she is getting better. But that was a secret I didn't know about. I'm just grateful that I was here in Atlanta and she knew to call me.
Well, I'm imagining something happened at college. I'll give you a general statistic. 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted on our college campus.
And that's what we fear, and we need her to tell us that, but we want to do it on her own timing.
Right, but this is what you can do. You can talk about shame and guilt in general.
Okay.
You can give information. Sometimes when something bad happens to somebody, they blame themselves.
Okay.
And we want
that's
you to
what we
know
fear.
we love you always. It's not your fault. Or you can share, you may have a personal experience of something happening and somebody blaming you. But yeah, you can give general information about moving through trauma and shame and guilt. You don't have
Yes,
to
I
make
was
it
able
tell
to.
details.
Yeah, I was able to do that with her because I was molested as a child, but I was able to explain to her how that impacted my life, and also how I was resilient, and I was staying with her through all of it. But that's what we fear have happened because she didn't want to go back to the campus. She didn't want to leave my house, and when she left my house, that's when it all happened.
Yeah.
But thank you so
Something
much.
on that campus.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy. You've
You're
been
welcome.
great.
I put a really long, unfortunately, link in the chat box that has a PDF of the slides. And Sherry did say that it is recorded. Are there other questions? I'll say the Wildflower Alliance offers 2 family and friends groups a week. You can email me if you're interested. The Connecticut HPN also has a family and friends group. Andrea, I see your hand.
I just wanted to jump in and say thank you. I am a member of the HBN family and friends, and what we heard today from Cindy has changed my life and my relationship with my daughter, who hears voices after her father died. And it was a rough go until I came and learned about this perspective. So I thank you, Cindy, with all my heart, and I'll continue to come. And I'm so happy people are learning this way.
Thank you, Andrea. I asked some of the people from the family and friends group, somebody show up and give me moral support. So I really appreciate it.
We have one more hand up now, Suzette.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much. This is incredible. I have a question. I'm going to be meeting with a family with young siblings who, experience their own confusion and trauma and fear, witnessing the client, having an episode. And I'm wondering if you have any insight or advice on how to approach like young teenagers or children, siblings about that.
Okay, so so what goes through my mind is how do we try to normalize this? How do we help these kids identify what makes them feel safe? So when this is happening, where do you feel safe? What do you need to see happening for you to feel safe? Right? Like each person's needs. And somebody may need to say, I need to know if X happens, more help's coming. Or I need to say, I need to be able to stay in my room and keep the door locked. That makes me feel safe. One family, one of the kids was older, and they just felt safer if they could lock their bedroom door. That helped them feel safer. But everybody, everybody in the family probably has a stigma, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hearing voices, killing people, guns, right? So let's blow that up a little. Let's give them information that there are people who make it through this, that there is something going on, that there's a team working on this.
Yeah.
There's a team working on this. Are there things that they can still enjoy with their sibling?
Uh-huh.
So it's not a total rejection of the sibling.
Right.
Can we still play video games together? Or, whatever it is. Because that's what happens, you know, someone gets totally marginalized because people don't understand and they're freaking out and they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
You know, so those are the things. How do I feel safe in this moment? You know, and can I learn that, you know, people go through this and sometimes they become actually even psychiatrists. Like, I was thinking of Dan Fisher. But yeah, you know, how do I would worry about let's not have them be traumatized too.